On August 4th, 2019, a 28-year-old man named Sumbora left his farm in rural Cambodia and headed off into the jungle. His goal that day was to climb the nearby Chakrai mountain and try to harvest as much bat guano as possible. So bat guano is bat poop, and it makes excellent fertilizer. And in the jungles of Cambodia, there are all these mountains, including Chakrai Mountain, that have these cave systems full of bats. So it's a great place to go looking for bat guano. And Sum and his family, they would go out there and harvest as much as they could in order to support their farm. This is kind of like their main business. And so on this particular day, Sum was not just going to climb this mountain and go into random caves and hope for the best. Today, his mission was to go to one cave in particular that he knew had a ton of bat guano inside of it, mostly because the other people in the area that went out harvesting bat guano, they wouldn't go into this cave. And the reason for that is the cave was really, really narrow and tight and frankly dangerous because of it, and so they didn't go into it. But Sum was a very slight guy with a narrow frame, and so he could basically get himself into tight spaces and reap the benefits of places like this cave. And so after hiking for about an hour through the jungle and then up this mountain, Sum finally reached the entrance to this particular cave. And it was an opening that was about 3 feet by 3 feet, and you really couldn't see very far into it. But Sum knew what he was doing, and pretty much immediately got down on his stomach. He got his flashlight out, he took his guano bag, which had a long strap coming off of it so he could drag it behind him, and he began wriggling his way into this opening. Now, the way this cave system roughly worked is there was this narrow entrance that went kind of straight ahead like a tunnel, and then periodically, as it continued along, there'd be these kind of like pockets, these openings, where it would get big enough where Sum could actually get up onto his hands and knees and kind of move around a little bit. And it was inside of these pockets, these caverns, where all the bats would be. And that's where most of their poop was. And so all Sum was trying to do as soon as he went inside this cave is get to these caverns and then do his harvesting. And so Sum, he wriggled his way forward, he got through that first tunnel section, and he entered the first cavern. And sure enough, there were quite a few bats on the ceiling, and there was all this bat guano, about a pound of bat guano. And so he scooped it all up, he put it into his bag, and then he kept on moving through the tunnel into the next cavern. And as he was making his way down that second stretch of tunnel, shining his light ahead, he saw what looked like the walls moving up ahead when he was looking into the next cavern. But he knew that was not actually the wall moving, it was a whole bunch of bats in this next cavern. And so from his perspective, it seemed like there were way more bats in that cavern than this one. And so in theory, this next cavern was gonna have a ton of bat guano, potentially all he would need for this entire journey. He could just pack his bag and leave after this next cavern. However, there was a small problem. Now, Sum had come to this spot many times before, and he knew that going from the first cavern to the next cavern had a little bit of a hiccup. On the ground, as you cross the threshold into this second cavern, was a crack in the ground that basically ran perpendicular to the way this tunnel ran. Now, the crack was only about 6 inches wide, but when you were over it shining a light down into this crack, it was like it went on forever. It was like this unending hole in the earth. And so Sum always just got creeped out climbing over this crack because there was really no way to go around it. You really had to go right over the top of it because all he was thinking about is like, what's down inside of this deep hole in this cave? It's reminiscent of how people are scared of really deep oceans like thalassophobia. It's fear of what's down there. And so Sum just really didn't like it. But again, he knew there was going to be a ton of bat poop if he could just cross over that crack, and so it was worth it. And so Sum, he wriggled his way through the tunnel, he reached the crack, he kind of shined his light down and again saw just this never-ending pit that just shot straight down into the earth. But Sum took a deep breath and he wriggled over the top of it successfully. And after he crossed it and he was about to enter into the cavern to get this huge bat guano payload, he felt something tugging on him, and immediately he was terrified and he whipped his head around wondering what could possibly be grabbing him. When he realized nothing was grabbing him, it was his guano bag that he dragged behind him with that big strap. It had gotten stuck on the crack itself. Sum was immediately relieved because he had really hyped up the idea that maybe there was some monster behind him or something, but there wasn't, and so he just kind of grabbed his strap and kind of jimmied the bag out of the crack. But as he did, he lost his flashlight. So he's moving the bag and he kind of fumbles the flashlight, and the flashlight rolled backwards into the crack. And as soon as this happens, Sum is watching with horror as he's seeing the light kind of jostling around as it tumbles down into the crack, but then it comes to a stop. Like it didn't just fall endlessly into the earth, it got wedged at some point, and the light from the flashlight was actually shining straight up. So it was pretty near the surface. And so Sum's thinking to himself, okay, that's bad. I can't lose my flashlight. I have to be able to see to get the bat poop and to get out of here. But let me just turn around and I'll reach into that horrible crack and I'll get my flashlight and everything will be okay. And so Sum carefully backed back down across the crack. And when he was looking straight down into the crack, he could see the flashlight. And it was wedged, pointing straight up, maybe 1.5 or 2 feet down. Now, Sum did not want to reach his arm into this crack for all the reasons he was scared of the crack. Like, he doesn't know what's down there, but he really needs his flashlight. And so Sum kind of backed himself up and mentally prepared himself, and then reached into the crack and began blindly reaching down, hoping to grab this flashlight and yank it out as fast as he could. But as he reached, he couldn't quite get to the flashlight. And so he began turning and twisting his body and forcing his shoulder deeper and deeper until finally he could touch the flashlight. And then finally, right as he grabbed the flashlight, something happened. That night, Sum did not return to his farm. Now, his family was not actually that worried about it because it was not uncommon for Sum to go out on these guano foraging adventures and be gone for, a couple days at a time. However, after another 2 days went by and still Sum had not returned, his family started to get worried. And so ultimately, Sum's brother decided to go out and look for him. Sum's brother had often collected guano with Sum in the past, and so he knew roughly where Sum liked to go, including Sum's favorite spot, that cave up in the mountain. And so when the brother went out looking for him, pretty quickly he found himself in that favorite spot. Now, Sum's brother was about the same size as Sum, and so he too could navigate this very tight tunnel. And so that's what he did. He got down on his stomach, he had his flashlight out, and he yelled into the cave for Sum, but there was no answer. And so he eventually made his way to that first cavern. He didn't find Sum, he kept going, and right as he was about to hit that second cavern, as he shined his light ahead, he saw there was a bag on the ground. And it was his brother's guano bag. And so he knew his brother had to have come here, and he began yelling out for his brother, but there was no answer. And then right as the brother paused for a second just to listen, he heard a faint cry, a human cry. And he called out, like, "Is that you, Sum?" And again, he heard another cry. But he's looking around and he can't see Sum anywhere. And so the brother just continues shimmying his way towards that second cavern. And right as he begins to cross over that crack, he hears the cry again, and it's coming from right below him. It's coming from the crack. And the brother takes his flashlight and shines it straight down into that crack. And there, in the crack, was Sum. He was wedged all the way inside of the crack. It would turn out, a few days earlier, when Sum was in this cave reaching for his flashlight, he couldn't quite get his fingers around the flashlight. And so he kept turning his body more and more until his body was parallel with the crack itself. And then finally, right as he's leaning down and he gets his hands on the flashlight, he rolled and fell into the crack. His whole body basically perfectly fit into the crack, and down he went several feet where he wedged into the crack. And then once he was wedged down there was nowhere to go. He was absolutely trapped. And so Sum laid in this crack for days, having no expectation he was going to get out. He was totally wedged, no food, no water. He was going to die, and he knew it. In fact, he actively wished he had a knife on hand so he could take his own life. But luckily for Sum, his brother would find him, his brother would go and get help, and on the 4th day of Sum being trapped inside of this crack, rescuers were able to pull him out, and he would make a full recovery.